A question asked courageously, answered honestly, and lived authentically can change your whole life. For me, that question was, how can I use what I have, what I love, and what I know to bless the lives of others? The School for Good Living and this podcast are one answer to that question. Hi, I'm Brian Miller. I know that the world can work for everyone, but that it won't until it works for you. I've created this to help you make the difference you were born to make. It's a series of conversations with thought leaders who are moving humanity forward. And in each episode, I explore their lives and the work they do. I also ask them to break down how they've gotten their books written, published, and read. This podcast is all about exploring the magic and mystery, and sometimes the misery, of the creative process. So if you have a mission, a message, and the motivation to share it, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the School for Good Living. Today I have a conversation with a really amazing indigenous healer. Arkan is a Peruvian ceremonial leader who was adopted by a Lakota Elder named Basil Brave Heart. He has written a couple books, one called The Time of the Black Jaguar, an offering of indigenous wisdom for the continuity of life on Earth, and more recently, Deer and Thunder, Indigenous Ways of Restoring the World. In this interview, we spend nearly 2 hours talking, and we never get to the writing part. In fact, he agrees to do a part 2 at some point in the future. And one of the things you'll hear is that he is a very humble man. In fact, he's the only podcast guest I've had who, when I asked him to tell me how he describes himself, he says first, as a farmer. I've never heard that before. Please take anything you hear in this interview with some caution, particularly some of the rituals and ceremonies that he talks about. Some of these things are potentially dangerous, and it's not to be played with. There's a real concern there. So taking care for your safety, making sure that anything you might do along these lines is under the guidance of someone who has experience and is looking out for your well-being. I think you'll enjoy this conversation and take away something that will help you to live a more satisfying, deeper life than perhaps you've previously known. That's a big claim. But you know what? I think it's true. Arkan, welcome to the School for Good Living podcast.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm happy to be part of this.
Yes, it's a true privilege for me to be able to talk with you this way.
Thank you, Brian.
You know, as I was reading your book, I realized that we have another friend in common, David Tucker, with the Pachamama Alliance. I went to the Amazon with him, and he was the first person who showed me around in the rainforest, and it was a truly transformative experience as well.
Yeah, David Tucker is a good friend of mine, and we feel very aligned in our missions, the way he sees the work that needs to be done to improve the presence of humanity in this world. We are pretty much agreeing on some of the things that need to be done, or the mind frame, the heart that we need to have in order to do our work. So, I always have really good conversations with David, and I'm looking forward to this good conversation with you, Brian.
Well, thank you. So, Arkan, tell me, if you will, please, what's life about?
Well, from the perspective of where I come from the Andean world, I was born in Arequipa in Peru, and now my, the indigenous culture that I most identify and where I do my ceremonies and my indigenous life is in the area of Cusco. And for all of us since ancient times, the way we see ourselves is not only as inhabitants of the earth. We see ourselves, without really making a big effort, this is part of our culture and our language, we see ourselves as members of the universe, members of the cosmos. So we know that we are children of the earth, and we are also children of the cosmos. We are children of the stars, and very particularly of the sun. And this is not just a belief system or a religious thing, because we don't really call our spiritual ways a religion. this is really based on the understanding of who we are and the wisdom of people who for thousands of years observed nature and observed their own nature, who they are. So our body and a lot of what we are is the earth. We have water inside, we have minerals inside, we have the same that the mountains have inside. And we eat food that comes from the earth and water that comes from the earth. That is our nourishment, and that's what we are, what we eat and what we drink.
Yes.
And then on the other hand, we are always absorbing light from the sun. We are always receiving the light of the sun directly when the sun touches our skin, our eyes, and gives us its warmth, or through the food that we eat also, because all the greens absorb the light of the sun. And in that way, we are always receiving, if you want to use this word, information from the universe through the light of the sun. So we are permanently being informed and formed by the earth and the sun, and we become the product of that, of what comes from both of them. So that's how we see ourselves. We see the world, the earth, as part of the cosmos, and we see ourselves as part of the earth and the cosmos. And the most important, of course, is to take the opportunity, of having consciousness as we live on this earth and this cosmos, the opportunity to take all that is given to us with consciousness, become aware of what is the gift, and live a beautiful life accordingly to all that is given to us and that is forming us.
No, I love that perspective. And as I hear you say it, I think back to my time, even in grade school. And, as we learned about the world and the United States and the different states within our own country here, I think about, the debate that occurred. Are we Federalists? Or are we state first? Are you a Utahn or are you an American? Are you a Californian or an American? And your discussion of, the cosmos beyond, any other label we might apply to ourselves is one that's, I think, really beautiful. And I wonder what our world might be like if more of us held that perspective. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yes. And there is an example of this. I'm sure there are many in the world, but the one that I know better is where I come from. The Inca people it was not an empire, as it is still told officially in the books and everything. It was more of a confederation, a unity of different nations. They are in the heart of the culture. One of the most important principles of the culture was to be aware that we are all equal, that no matter what nation you belong to, or where were you born, that we are all in the same path. We all belong to the earth. We all belong to the cosmos, to the universe. And then some of those very wise ancestors, they insisted on people learning about that we are all capable of receiving the same guidance, information, and nourishment from the earth and the universe, no matter where we are. And before, in the Andes, there was a time that actually lasted a long time, different periods, sometimes hundreds of years and sometimes even thousands of years, where people had this mentality where it wasn't about, I'm different than you because I belong to this nation and you belong to that one. Yes, we are different, and I love my culture and the way I dress and the way I speak, but in another level, I'm exactly the same you are. Therefore, we can cooperate, we can do things together. We don't have to be in war. I don't have to defend myself from you because we are the same. This consciousness was really present believe me, for a very long time in some parts of South America, and for me that is proof that it can be done. And actually, the times when that was the case were the best times. It was when there was less war and more abundance for the well-being of all people, all humans, and all life. Because actually the truth is this mentality also extends to animals, plants, rocks, mountains, that they also, have the same quality, the same capacity to receive light from the universe and develop themselves as we do.
That's not something that I was taught in school about. It's not an empire. It was a federation, and, the nature of it and that. And I love to hear your view on that. And as I listen to you, one thing I wonder is if there's a perspective inherent in that worldview that leads to or inevitably means that it will be overtaken by a more aggressive culture, where if it's so welcoming, if it's so open, if it's so inclusive, does that mean that it's inevitably subject to subjugation, domination, control, eradication? Or is there a way that same spirit, which of course is still present on the earth and in many people today, but it doesn't seem to be the predominant one, is there a way that what might be a more heart-centered way of living can still be strong enough to withstand any kind of aggressive or outside influence?
Yes. It takes a lot of courage because, the way of protectionism and the aggressive way, it really comes from fear. The people who use that way, of course they think they are right and they think that their values are correct, and they are not necessarily bad people, but they are probably not aware that they are acting from fear.
Yeah.
The other way, the way that of sharing instead of protecting so much, it takes a lot of courage. But it doesn't only take courage; it takes a certain development. In order to have an influence on other people in a peaceful way, these people have to respect you.
Yeah.
And in order for them to respect you, you have to be a well-developed human being. They won't respect you if you are trying to teach something that you don't practice, or if you are trying to speak about a human quality that you don't really have.
Yeah.
You have to, or we have to, those of us who want this peaceful culture, we have a big responsibility, and we have to really polish ourselves and develop ourselves to in a big extent in order to be able to do that. And let me give you an example. Is it okay if I take a little time to speak about one of our ancient cultures? And
yes, please do.
Yeah. Well, in Peru, and actually very close to where I grew up, part of my childhood, they discovered 24 years ago what now is considered the second oldest civilization in the world. It's called Caral, Caral, Caral. It is the second oldest in the world. First is Mesopotamia, then is Caral, then is Egypt. So this civilization lasted at least 2,000 years. There is proof of that. Of course, there is a lot of studies being made by scientists, archaeologists. 2,000 years. They had 7 permanent fires lit for 2,000 years. And they used these fires to make offerings for 2,000 years. Their main dedication was to offer nourishment as a reciprocity, as a form of gratitude to the universe and to the earth for all that they received. So kind of their main occupation was to nourish in a sacred way with a high vibration, with a high quality of energy through ceremony, to nourish that which nourished them. and in that way keep the beautiful, high quality world alive. That was their main dedication for 2,000 years.
What kinds of things? So if I understand what you're saying, you said that this civilization, Caral, had 7 fires burning continuously for 2,000 years, and they'd use those to offer gratitude. What kinds of things would they burn in the fires, or do you have an idea of what those rituals were like?
Yeah, because we still have them. Caral, more and more the people who study these things are coming to the conclusion. They are still studying it, but many of them are already coming to the conclusion that Caral really was like a mother culture in South America. And even the Inca culture that happened, like 5,000 years after, Caral has many, many aspects of the culture that are recognized already as being born in Caral. And one of them, which we still have, and actually I use in my work, is the making of offerings. So now, of course, we do it in a different way because after the conquest, we had to learn to make our offerings not in temples, but anywhere we were, sometimes hiding in mountains or caves. But we have never stopped doing them. So the offerings pretty much consist on preparing a design on top of, could be a piece of cloth or a piece of paper nowadays, with flowers, coca leaves, sweets, corn, different kinds of seeds, and prepare a beautiful design that actually, because of the way we place things, it has a meaning, it has a balance, it has, a power because of how it is designed. But it is made only with these elements that I just described. And then that prayer, that design with these elements is placed on the fire, is burned. And all the prayers and the beauty and the vibration and the heart that was placed in that piece of cloth or paper when that design was made, when it is placed in the fire, it becomes smoke. And that smoke it goes everywhere. It goes to its destination, the destination that was named when we did the prayers. So that smoke carries the prayer, carries the vibration, the heart, the love, the gratitude, and that energy penetrates its destination. It penetrates the mountains, it penetrates the trees, it penetrates the land, it can go all the way to the sun because it's energy. I have spoken about this with a quantum physics scientist, and he told me that scientifically speaking, what we do is possible. It's not a religion, it's not just a belief system. It is possible to do these things. And as you well know, the Tibetans do the same. There are many ancient cultures that do the same. So when the archaeologists studied those fireplaces in Caral, they went down, excavating and looking for organic matter, and they have proven that for 2,000 years, people were putting these offerings in those fires all the time. There is evidence. I cannot tell you right now exactly what are the elements they used in Caral, but there were some fruits, I think some fish they used there because it's very close to the ocean. There are fish scales, I think they found there. But pretty much things that we eat, we give for the earth to eat.
Yeah.
But charged with our prayers, which is different.
Right.
One thing is a fish or an apple, or something that we eat as it comes from the tree, and another thing is when it is charged with our prayers, with our celebration, with our gratitude. it is enhanced. It has a different type of energy, and that's what we give back. We give back what we were given, but enhanced and charged with a much higher vibration, and we offer it to the sources of our own nourishment. That is what, for us, pretty much defines what it is to be a human being. A human being in our culture is someone who takes responsibility for nourishing the earth and the universe and making it even more beautiful than it was when it was given to us.
Wow. So that's inherent in the very definition or idea of what it is to be a human being in your culture, is to nourish.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I could not consider myself a real human being if I wouldn't do that. Because let's put it this way: every form of life has a mission. An apple tree gives apples. A bear, has a certain place and mission in the ecosystem of the mountain where he or she lives. The fish, the salmon, the insects, everyone has a mission that is part of the balance of all life. So what is the mission of a human being? When we really place ourselves as part of nature, what is our mission? Our mission is in our talent. Our talent is what tells us what our mission is. We have an amazing talent to do art, to transform the things that we receive and enhance them into a much higher, much refined, beautiful, powerful frequency of vibration that is delightful to all the other forms of life, to the earth itself, to all of creation. And those vibrations, those creations of us humans, they have a nourishing capacity. They feed life. They feed the quality of the earth and the universe. And doing that is really anyone who does that, even a musician, an artist, someone who takes care of a garden, all of us who do these things, we know that doing that, we discover ourselves. While doing that, we find out our talent. We find out that we can do that and who we are. And it is really fulfilling, to arrive to that awareness.
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful perspective and a very empowering one. And there's a line in the last chapter of your second book, Deer and Thunder, where you write, "A human being becomes nature, doing the work of nature." And I was really impressed by that. And it sounds like, clearly that's something that's available to each of us, but not all of us maybe realize it or certainly pursue it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that also answers one of your previous questions. When we have that level of awareness of who we really are, then, how to be in the world and how to relate to people of other nations, it's not a political decision. It's not an intellectual, necessarily an intellectual decision. It is natural. We're guided by our instinct, by this heart and mind that we have that is part of the heart and mind of the earth and the universe. So it becomes kind of common sense, I don't think the people of Caral or the Inca people who, didn't have war, the Inca people did have war, but the Caral people didn't for 2,000 years, and find really good ways of having good relationships with other nations. I don't think it took them, a lot of political training. It was more instinctual in some way. They knew it. They were guided by the light they carried within themselves. They just were being themselves.
Yeah.
It was a natural wisdom, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. And in some ways, I think that's been forgotten or maybe never learned. But yet I have the sense that it is somehow innate to all of us. So how can we forget something that's already in us, but maybe it requires an awakening or a return to something which is part of why I'm so fascinated by you and your work and your teachings. When I met you, I didn't really know what to expect. And, anyone that Lynn says, hey, trust me, you're going to like this person, you're going to like this experience. I went along with it. And when we were together, well, I do want to get to this, but before we do, I know we've been talking for almost about a half hour, and I haven't asked you yet to share a little bit about who you are. People have heard this voice, speaking, and they'll have heard my intro setting this up, but I'd love to hear from your own voice. When someone asks you who you are or what you do, how do you describe yourself when you talk to someone? I realize that might change from person to person or situation to situation, but how do you typically introduce yourself in the times that you do?
Well, that's a hard one because in our cultures we in order to do the things that we do, we understand that we need to stay as humble as we can. The capacity to do our work really requires that we always stay humble. When we make a big deal about ourselves, then we end up thinking that the power to do what we do comes from us. And, so no matter how young or old we are, we have to always, be careful to not have too much grandiosity about how we define ourselves. So I'm just a humble man. I'm a farmer. I'm a father. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. And for some reason, since I was little, I had the inclination to do the ceremonial work, to prepare the offerings, to lead the prayers and the ceremonies. I was born with that inclination and that capacity. So it led me to find people older than me, teachers and elders, who told me that I could learn what they knew, and they taught me some things that make it possible for me to sometimes help people when they are sick or when they are confused. That's more individual type of work, which sometimes I do, but nowadays, in the last 10 years or so, I do more of the bigger ceremonies oriented to the healing of all that has been damaged on the earth. And also, now my elders tell me that I need to share all what I have learned. So that sometimes puts me in a position of someone who teaches,
Yeah.
But it's hard to call myself a teacher because I'm also learning. So, and I still have teachers. So it's just a role that sometimes I play. Sometimes I play the role of ceremonial leader. I lead the ceremonies. My elders entrusted me with, they gave me the authorization and the bundles, the altars, the elements that someone needs in order to have the authority to lead ceremony for communities and people. So I do that. I do those things. That's my work.
When I met you, Arkan, one of the things that made an impression on me was that, well, there's a whole bunch, but one is I was really struck by one thing you said just at a lunch we were having together, where you shared very quietly that in the Western culture or the Northern culture, depending on how you call it, in our society, very often we have a tendency to speak from a place of intellect, a place of knowledge. We're sharing, our conversation is a share of from the mind, but not always, or maybe not so much from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that because I've looked at the intention behind things I do, from how I brush my teeth and how I eat and how I talk to another person. And I find, very often I am looking at how can I use this information? How can I, optimize or maximize the benefit from this situation, this interaction, something like that. And it really invited me to slow down and investigate my intention in my connection with other people and with things. Will you talk to me a little bit about that?
We are really in big trouble. Humanity is in trouble. And it's going to require a lot of wisdom and an alignment of the wisdom of many people to get ourselves out of this very difficult situation. It's going to take, if you want to call it that way, impeccability. We got to be impeccable. Mm. We have to close all of our leaks as people who serve, as spiritual warriors, if you want to call it that way, as servants of humanity. It's going to take really the best of ourselves, the best of the best leaders in the world to get us out of this very dangerous situation we are as humanity. So I feel responsibility around that. I need to stay humble in order to do the best I can do. And I myself, I am in the same danger of this than everyone else is. So I have to always watch for how, I can go in the wrong direction, And the wrong direction would be to make myself bigger than the teachings, to make myself more important than the instructions that come from the earth, the sun, the universe, the ancient wisdom of humanity, of the ancient people who are really wise. I cannot make myself bigger than that, because if I do, then I can't serve well. Then I would be busy, keeping that image for myself and for others, and that's a lot of work. I don't want to do that. I prefer to just stay humble and keep learning and not be tied to an image where I have to always be the one who knows everything or the one that people looks at for wisdom. I prefer to encourage actually every human being to find their own wisdom, because we need lots of human beings to wake up and have the same wisdom so we can make a big team of wise people and find the solutions to our problems. Unfortunately, in modern culture, there is certain personalities are being followed and seen as special and important, and that is a distraction. That doesn't support necessarily the awakening, the collective awakening. That people rely on other people for their wisdom, or that people compensate for their shortcomings and their lack of development by making, by having someone important that has that development in up there in a monument, and say, this is the one, I follow this one. No, I mean, my wish is that every human being takes responsibility for their own development. Yeah. I'm not special. I'm not better than anyone. I just did my work, and still have a lot of work to do.
Do you mind if I read? There's about a paragraph in your book that I think speaks to this.
Yeah.
So you say, this is now in the time of the Black Jaguar, you write, "Those who instructed me didn't try to educate me. They left me alone on a hill. They gave me medicine. They played tricks on my ego. And mostly, they touched my heart, my little heart, with their big hearts. When I was ready to learn something, they put me in situations where they knew I would learn by myself. More than being an authority superior to my own will, they made everything possible to assist me in my awakening. They never interfered with the destiny that I was forging for myself."
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty different from the way the industrialized world educates people. It's not. There's nothing like the way I was educated. But I think, again, that's part of what really draws me to you and your work, is that I feel that's not something I've had, and that it could help me develop and round out as a human being, where I've spent a lot of years studying Asian culture, Asian thought, Western, rational, empirical, psychologically and scientific informed traditions, personal growth, these other things. But when we were together, I thought, despite having grown up here in the Rocky Mountains and having right in my own backyard, forests and lakes and, a lot of beauty, I have not learned from nature. I'm sure I haven't learned. And one of the things that you said when we were there, and I think it came up from something as simple as the insects out in the desert where we were with you. And you said to one of the participants who was like shooing this fly away, like, don't fear nature. Will you talk a little bit more? I mean, I tend to think, oh, nature can be scary. It's, it's big, it's powerful, it's mysterious, and then here you were saying, no, like, don't fear nature. Will you talk a little bit more about the thinking behind that?
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful question. There is so, amongst the big amount of people seeking to help and make sure that the earth doesn't is not destroyed by human activities, and people who want to protect and take care of the earth. There's a lot of people who are afraid of insects and snakes and this and that. So that is a contradiction, Don't be afraid of the earth. If all those snakes and insects and cold and winds and storms and all of that is the earth.
Yeah.
So we cannot have a good relationship with something that we are afraid of. We can't, So we can have respect, and we can have the awareness that what is in front of us is really powerful, and have respect and be careful and have some caution in some cases, but not fear. Not fear. It's very difficult to have a good relationship with someone that we are afraid of. And all those elements that people are afraid of are the earth.
Yeah.
The snake is the earth. The mountain is the earth. The wind is the earth. So where is the wisdom for us to do our work going to come from?
Yeah.
Who is the wisest entity on this earth that can tell us how to bring the environment back to a state of balance? The one who knows that more than anyone is the earth herself.
Yeah.
This may be weird for, in Western culture, maybe not for everyone. For some scientists, actually, it's not weird what I'm going to say, but for indigenous people, it's natural. We can have communication with the earth. There are ways in which we can read what the earth is trying to tell us. We can learn directly from her. She can guide us. She's the wisest scientist and source of information for us to find the solutions is the earth herself. But how can we keep open that channel of communication with the earth when we mistrust her, when we think she's going to hurt us,
Yeah.
when we think that she's mean, So we know that, there are dangers that we have to learn how to live on earth and be careful, but that doesn't mean the earth wants to hurt us. That means when something like that happens, it means we didn't have the wisdom, we were not careful, or we were not listening, to the signs that were telling us to be careful, So your question is very important, Brian. Thank you for asking that. I'm not telling people, hey, go play with the rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful if you are in front of a rattlesnake, but don't hate rattlesnakes. and don't kill them if you see one. Just be careful. Just don't step on them. Don't touch them. And and if you see one, say hello. You are so beautiful, and walk away.
Yeah.
Don't respect her environment, and also find out what is the wisdom of rattlesnakes, and don't make them your enemy, because they are not.
What about mosquitoes, though?
Like, those are very difficult to be friends with.
Yeah.
But yeah, they also play a role. They give me a hard time, and I have to be very patient. It's.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to say is, how do you offer what you have to offer in a way that doesn't puff yourself up or make you seem, maybe more important than you really are?
I'm willing to do this work, to give a message through really good people like you, and I'm grateful, for this interview and the opportunity to touch people that I don't know. I don't know who's going to listen to these words, and still I know they are my brothers and my sisters, and I'm glad that through this interview, some people are going to hear some things that I hope are helpful.
Yeah.
Also, the books I write also seek that. It's a matter of balance. It's a matter of balance. What I'm careful with is with it becoming too big.
Yeah.
If it becomes too big, or it is absorbed by the modern culture that makes people famous, or that makes it too commercial, if I am absorbed by that, I can lose what is precious to me. Because if I lose it, then I have nothing to give.
Right.
I can give you an example from nature. Let's say there is this tree, this big tree that has a lot of avocados, and the best that can happen is that some people come and take some avocados, and the seeds, go over to other places where new avocados grow as big as that one, and there is a lot of avocado trees.
Yeah.
That's great. But if you make a big deal about one tree, and lots of people come to that one tree and eat all the avocados of that tree is going to be famous for a while. It's going to get a lot of attention for a while, and then it's going to be done. It's going to be wasted.
Yeah.
You see, so it doesn't seem to be a wise approach.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And also, it's related to what I told you before. I do believe that everybody can learn, everybody can receive the same wisdom I received. But that takes a lot of work. I don't really think that someone hears one phrase that I wrote in my book, or something I said, and because of that, they already know.
Right.
In order to really learn, people have to practice. People have to do the work. So, I don't want to make it just about that, where, people hear some things that I said that I learned from my teachers, or that I was instructed through a ceremony by the earth or the sun, and that they just think that because they hear that sentence or this teaching, that they already know. That can be misleading. That is not true.
Yeah.
And in the modern world that is very intellectual, there is the big danger that people think that they know something because their intellectual mind knows it.
Right.
I don't think that's true. You have to completely embody the teaching. The teaching has to live in our heart, mind, body, and spirit in order to really have completely landed in ourselves, so we may be able to have that teaching be the foundation of our actions and our words. If we have not really embodied the teaching completely in ourselves, if it's not carried by the water and the light that lives within our body, it's just in our head.
Yeah.
That is one of the problems of the modern world. A lot of teachings are just in the head. And we can spend hours and hours and hours talking from our head without really having the capacity to create change.
Yeah.
To create change, we need to have an inner power, an inner sacred power, a real ability and capacity to move things, to transform things, like the sun does it, like the earth does it, like any natural sacred power does it. So it has to go way beyond our head.
Yeah.
So I can, if I spend most of my time, just talking, of course, it's going to inspire people, and it may lead some people to look for the practices and to go do what is required in order to develop themselves. I understand that. I'm sure that some people listening to this interview will do that. But I also have to do my ceremonies. I also have to have a small community of people where I can really have a direct relationship with some of my relatives, and especially younger people that can learn. But, a teacher who has 1,000 people learning from him or her is not going to be able to really teach them well. 10 I can, help really well. 1,000 I can't, So
Yeah.
it's better to have 1,000 teachers, that each one of them has 10 people learning from them, than have one teacher that has 1,000,000 students. Yes, it's just a practical thing,
Yeah.
And why I prefer that, because I really care. I really care, not for whatever is good for me personally. It's what's necessary.
Yeah.
We're not going to get out of this trouble unless we have millions of people remembering the original wisdom of humanity.
I think you're right. And at the same time, I mean, of what you're saying about we won't get out of the trouble we're in unless we have, millions of people having this collective awakening that you've described. And at the same time, with respect, I'd push, and I know I invited you to share your perspective, but I would just challenge you a little bit on what you're saying, where you're talking about working with small groups. And I mean, I think about me personally with anyone that I want to learn from. If that teacher holds that perspective, that's a privilege to be one of those few. And at the same time, I do think there are some teachers today, some leaders who are effectively leveraging technology and organization with a certain intention, who are helping to transmit almost an energy or that intention, even though it's at a larger scale. And I say that, I mean, the one who comes to mind most is someone I don't know if you know, is a guy named Sadhguru, that I've been learning from for about the last year and a half. And over 40 years, he's built a massive volunteer organization here in America and in India and around the world. But it's interesting to me to see him, because I've never seen a teacher who I believe has done what you're saying about embodied the teachings in heart, mind, body, and spirit, and then been able to scale that in a way that I don't think was possible. Well, it might have been possible, but I don't know how we would have done it without modern technology. And I just, not suggesting you're wrong necessarily, just, and I know everyone has their own style and preference, but I think maybe there is something more possible. But what do you think?
Well, no, for sure, it's excellent that someone can do that. I admire people that can do that, and the universe and the earth can work in many different ways, and there are many different types of talents and medicines that different people carry. So, bottom line, I can say, that's not my way. That's
Sure.
not.
Sure.
If someone can do that and do it well, and do it in a way that really goes deep and really transforms people and really gives people the tools for a deep transformation and arriving to having the wisdom and the power to make the earth and humanity better.
Mm-hmm.
Big respects for people like that.
Yeah.
That's not me. I don't. You cannot ask an apple tree to give you pears.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not my way. I could not feel in my environment and my own medicine doing something like that.
Yeah.
But I do admire people who can do it for sure.
No. Okay, so we're about an hour in, and I haven't even yet asked you to talk a little bit about your books. But I want to turn to that now by asking, with and maybe the answer is different for the two different books. But who? So this first one, I'll read the title: "The Time of the Black Jaguar: An Offering of Indigenous Wisdom for the Continuity of Life on Earth." And the second book that was more recently released, Deer and Thunder: Indigenous Ways of Restoring the World. Will you tell me, who did you write these books for, and what did you want the books to do for them?
Yeah, there is, throughout the years, mostly since I moved from Peru to the United States to New Mexico, I do ceremonies and I also do teachings. I go to places where people invite me. I meet people from, like you, who are also doing their work in the world, people of different organizations, people making different efforts. And this is actually tied to our previous conversation. And please, I'm not really making any judgment here. It's just something that I learned in my own experience, is that there are so many talented people, really, really good people that are willing to put time and effort into this mission, that sometimes do not have the full understanding of how they can increase their sacred personal power, their sacred inner talent, which can really, really help them do their work better. There are some efforts that really create powerful consequences, and there is a lot of efforts that don't. And because we're in a crisis, we need most of the efforts to really make a difference. You see, so my perspective is, what if these really good people who are making an effort, receive some of the gifts that I received from the ancient wisdom, from the elders of the indigenous cultures, from the connection to the spirit world, the connection to the spiritual guides that are really gifted and that can help us do our work better. What if those people really remember, not even learn, but remember that you can have allies in the world. There are mountains, there are rivers, there are powerful sources of energy and light that can really help them do their work. And I realized that's a different mind frame. That's a different way of seeing things. That's a different methodology. The methodology of people who go to college and school, and again, please understand, I'm not judging that methodology. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's missing something. In the methodology of that we are taught in school and college, we are not taught to make direct connections with the powers of nature in the universe. We are only taught to see them from the distance and study them. We are not taught to make a relationship with them. Some people don't even believe or have in their mind the understanding that is possible. So in my books and the teachings that I give, what I try to do is to offer what I was offered, which is the possibility to claim our inheritance. The inheritance that we all can claim that comes from the ancient people, very ancient people before humanity became highly intellectual and anthropocentric. There was a time in the ancient times where the world was not anthropocentric, where not everything was run by humans, and actually humans were humble enough to listen and be guided. That has been lost. And that is something that's a huge, huge loss. When we humans think that the intelligence to resolve our problems only comes from humans, we are handicapped. The intelligence doesn't become only from humans. The intelligence comes from the earth itself, from the spirit world, from the universe. There is so much intelligence in the universe that we can access if we know how to, if we are humble enough, if we know how to listen. But that is another mind frame, that's another methodology, that's another way of being humans that requires, certain skills that we indigenous people develop in ceremony. In ceremony, we get out of our head and we listen and we feel with our heart. We receive, we remember in our heart things that are way wiser than what we learned in school or what we read in a book. That, of course, I totally understand. It is a very valid choice. Some people say, well, I'm not interested in that. I love human intelligence and that's what I want to pursue. I say that's fine. Everybody can choose whatever they feel more attracted to. But the reason why I wrote my books is because I know that there are many people, and you may be one of them, Brian, because you have said many times that you were touched by what you experienced when we met.
Yep.
There are many, many people who feel that something is missing in their work, that they are having some progress, but maybe not as much as they would like to. So what I have reflected on, what if what is missing is the ancient wisdom of humanity? What if what is missing is indigenous methodology? A different way. Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve a problem with the same tools that created the problem.
Yeah.
That really struck me. I said, well, what if there is a lot of people trying to resolve the problems created by the modern world with the same tools of the modern world? Is that going to work?
I think we're seeing the answer to that question right now,
Yeah. So, and really, don't take me wrong, I'm not about disregarding technology or the tools of the modern world. Some of them we are using them right now, you and I, and they are being useful and they may help people. So I'm not against them, but there may be a problem if that's the only thing we use.
Yeah.
There may be a problem if we think that this technological development and this intelligence of that humanity has reached in this time is really what's going to take us out of the crisis we are in. I don't know, but I feel that the answer is no. It doesn't seem to be happening. Look what's going on. I mean, we should have resolved the crisis of the environment 10, 20 years ago.
And I think that's one of the ways that people keep themselves from taking action is they're just thinking, technology or our evolving consciousness or the government or something will ultimately save us. Yeah, things are crappy now, but they're all going to be fine. And then they don't embrace their personal power or what you're talking about, developing their own sacred talents. They just sit on the sidelines.
Exactly right. That's what I was trying to say, Brian. You said it more clear than me.
Arkan, how many languages do you speak?
Well, I speak Quechua, I speak Spanish, I speak English, and then I speak Italian and Portuguese, but not so well,
Amazing.
And then a little bit of Lakota, but no, just when I go to Pine Ridge to my relatives in South Dakota, I understand the prayers, I understand some things. I can sing the Lakota songs in ceremony and know what they mean, but, I can't say I speak Lakota, very little.
No, it's. So one thing I want to ask you, you were talking about just a few minutes ago, talking about through ceremony, how we can learn or maybe remember something. And you told me an experience about a young man who participated, I believe, in a vision quest. I don't know if it was a vision quest or maybe a Sundance with you, who afterwards came back and wanted to drink a Coca-Cola. Will you tell those, me and those people listening, that story and what that was like for you?
Which one in particular? Can you remind me a little bit of the context?
Yeah, so you shared something about someone who had come to you from outside and wanted to learn something or have a certain experience and did. And then at the conclusion of it, as you were riding back in the truck, asked you to pull over.
Yeah, well, this guy, he did a 4 days vision quest, 4 days with no food and water, and I come, get him from the mountain. We go to the sweat lodge. I hear his prayer, and it was a beautiful prayer. He had remembered a lot of wisdom, being alone with nature and with spirit. I learned from what he said. It was beautiful. A lot of wisdom came from this young man, and I was very happy to hear that. And I felt, I saw myself in him because I had those experiences, and I felt this is a turning point in his life. If he pursues this wisdom and he doesn't forget what he received when he was on the hill, he's going to be a leader. He's going to be this man is going to go far. So then when we come down from our ceremonial grounds to the valley where we, have our kitchen and our showers and stuff, we, like going back to, to the away from nature, closer to the comforts of our homes. Mm-hmm. He wanted me to stop. He asked me to stop in a gas station to buy a drink, and I said, "Well, you had water." No, he said, "I have been dreaming with having a cold drink." I said, "Well, it's your choice." I stopped, and he went in, and he came back with a Coca-Cola, with a cold Coca-Cola in his hands, and he started drinking it, and I felt pretty sad because I knew that was going to turn it off, Mm-hmm. Like he needed to. It has happened to many people actually in different ways, He couldn't stay in that state that was far from his comfort zone, far from what was familiar to him, far from what his humanness was caught on in this world. When you have very sacred, powerful experiences, you go away from that. You kind of start seeing yourself differently. But sometimes your identification with your humanness and and your membership in the simple human world, wants to pull you back. Yeah. Hey, you cannot be that sacred being. You cannot be that guy that is connected to the spirit world. You gotta come back to us and be as one of us. So why don't you have a Coca-Cola and get over with it?
Yeah, and you told me that he said after drinking the Coke, he said, I feel like my old self again.
Oh, that's right. Exactly. That's right. That's the most revealing. Yeah, he said that.
And what a shift, right? Because it's not what he thought was his old self was perhaps not his old self, but he had achieved a connection in some way with his old self on the hill. 4 days with no food or water, with an intention and some prayer.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's what I was talking about before. Thank you for bringing that up. My question to all those who are listening is, how far are you willing to go? How far are you willing to go into your real self? I'm not, and really, I'm not saying do very extreme things and put your life in danger and do crazy things. No, I mean, go to people who know how to build a safe container for you through meditation or ceremony or vision quest, whatever, where, people who have the experience doing those things that can create a container for you to be in silence for a long time, to be fasting, to be, able to really go out of your head and deep into your deep self that is part of the earth and the universe, and really discover who you really are. And then when I ask how far are you willing to go with it, do you want to do that for 4 days only? Or you want to do it for 10 days? Do you want to be who you really are just for a month? Or do you really, really want to be that and stay like that?
Yeah.
Time, I have to be honest, there is a time when people who do that do have a conflict between the real self that is awakening and their human part. They don't speak the same language. They don't want the same things. There is a conflict. It is difficult. And that's why when we go through that conflict, we need teachers, we need mentors, we need practices, we need a container that can help us go through that. And then one day, everyone can arrive to a place where the human self is still there. The human self it has its shortcomings, it has its human appetites, it has all that a human has. And I'm not saying get rid of that or make it wrong or crush it. No, not at all. We gotta love ourselves and all that we are. But what changes is that human self with all its appetites and ignorance and shortcomings is no longer the ruler. Is no longer the one who runs our actions. We have arrived to a place where our real self, the light of our spirit, the part of us that is keen to the earth and the universe, has grown big enough to be the ruler, to be the one who decides what we say, what we do, how we do it. And yes, we still will be human, we still make mistakes, but not as much as before, And of course that higher self will have compassion on the mistakes of our humans and the mistakes of its own human self, and not be a tyrant and not be rigid, and stay humble and always learn. Because the truth is, if you arrive to that point and you can be connected to your higher self, then you know how small you are.
Yeah.
You know that the big stars out there and that the earth has so many sacred people, and that you are just one more, and then you keep listening, you keep learning, you keep paying attention, and, but something has changed. What has changed is when you really need wisdom, you know how to access it. You know what is the place within you that you need to go to in order to access the best wisdom, the highest light you can make use of when you really want to do something good for someone else, for the earth, for humanity. That's what changes. That now you have quick access to that you don't have to, take a long time to get to that. It's right there. You have cultivated a relationship with that part of yourself. You just walk a step and you are there anytime you want. That is a treasure. And that is a treasure that any person trying to do good for humanity and the earth could have.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, sorry for saying it like that, but I think should have, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest resource, you know?
Yeah.
Our own wisdom and the access to it.
No. It's really amazing for me to hear you speak about it that way, because I think that's what I personally have been looking for, and I think a lot of people have been looking for a long time, in that sense you mentioned that so many people in their work or just in their lives overall feel that something's missing. And when we say something's missing, it implies that it's possible or it's available, and all there is to do is to find it and to integrate it. And when in your book you make this mention, you say very difficult ceremonies like fasting alone on a hill provide us with the resources to remember the well-being of our people and the world in which we live. In these ceremonies, years of human routine are severely interrupted, right? Like years of living the way we've lived, to just go out and have this prayer, this fasting, no food or water, for days at a time. Of course, that's pretty intense. And it's no surprise, because just a couple pages earlier, you write, Indigenous people intentionally get close to death, not from wanting to physically harm ourselves, but to liberate the flow of our lives from certain heavy energies that create stagnation, illness, and oblivion. No, I would imagine people listening to this, if they're like me, they hear that and they simultaneously want it, but they're afraid of it. They're like, I would love to do that, but I have all these responsibilities. I've got a job, I've got kids, I've got a mortgage. I couldn't possibly go off. And B, is it safe? Like, I might die, right? You can't go 4 days with no water. That's crazy, that kind of thing. But what's your experience with finding people, or rather people finding you? Because I would imagine that people who are in intense pain, I mean, as we know, many people are addicted to substances, to unhealthy practices, whether it's work or shopping or something else, or they're just outright killing themselves, like committing suicide. And I understand that some people find you as an alternative to, those, hopefully. They don't know what else to do, but they make their way to Arawaku, or they somehow cross paths with you in search of healing. What's your experience with someone like that who wants to participate in a transformational experience like a Vision Quest?
Yeah, well, you mentioned a few different things that I would like to address. The first one is, please, if you're hearing this interview, don't go do things like that on your own. It can be dangerous. I know of people, young people, who said, I'm going to do a Vision Quest, and they went up to a mountain by themselves without any guidance or any container or knowledge of how to do it, and that was the end for them. So it is dangerous if it's not done under the experience and wisdom of traditions of doing that go back thousands of years, where there is a way to do it that is safe, and there is a way to do it that can be pretty unsafe. So that I really wanted to say before I say more.
No, thank you.
Is you mentioned that people do these things because they feel something is missing, and I always say, when you feel that something is missing, most probably what is missing is you. Really, like, it's you, nothing else. It's just you. So
that just kind of makes it worse in some way, though, Arkan. It's like, because then when you're the thing that's missing, how do you possibly find yourself when you're the one having the sense that something's missing?
Yeah, you are saying it yourself. You create a time and a space to get rid of the distractions, and make yourself available to feel yourself, to feel the deepest part of yourself. And it takes time. When I do Vision Quest, the first day is so ridiculous. It's so, oh man, it's just listening to a broken record, It's my thoughts, my mental activity that by inertia keeps going, even though I have nothing to do. My mind is so busy thinking about the same things, family, work, my past, and this and that, And then suddenly all that activity starts diminishing, and suddenly there is some silence. There is, and then I'm just really there with myself. And then I start feeling things. I start feeling and perceiving from my real self. From my real self, I can perceive the spirit of a tree. And it's an extraordinary experience, to be connected to my real self, be who I really am, from my spirit, my essence, and connect to the essence of a tree that is in front of me on the hill. There is no way to describe what that is, I can't define it, but it's an extraordinary experience, So the real me is always there. It's just that I'm not listening to it. I'm not paying attention to it. And when I say the one missing is me, is that it doesn't mean it's not there, It's like, imagine you have your partner or your friend right next to you, but you are so distracted that you are not paying attention to that one. And suddenly you realize, oh, I'm missing my friend. And you turn around and it's right there.
Yeah.
But why were you missing it? Because you were not paying attention. You were so distracted, so in your head, so, self-absorbed that it was right there next to you and you were not paying attention. Actually, I can say, thanks to your question, Brian, really good question. Everything starts with a feeling of missing it.
Mm.
Maybe it is our real self who gives us that feeling, but that feeling is the beginning of the path. And going back to the path, and we have to go back to the path 1,000,000 times, many times a day. Every time I feel I'm missing myself, I'm about to get myself back. When I don't feel nothing, when I don't remember that I'm missing myself, that's when I'm totally lost. You see, so it's really good to hang out with people, go to places, go to ceremonies or meetings or conversations that can help us remember that we are missing ourselves. The moment we remember that, we're one step away, And if we realize, yeah, I get myself back, I remember myself, but I can only keep myself in my awareness for a minute, maybe 5. The meeting is over, the conversation is over, and I go back to my old habits and I lose myself again. Well, that's when you can make the decision to do something stronger. Really go look for someone that can help you have many days, a more intense experience. Am I asking people to come to me? No, not really, because I can't. How many vision quests can I lead in a year? Just one. Really, when the time is right, and there is a time to do our ceremonies, how many people can I put on vision quest in one time? I promised that I was never would put more than 20, and now I'm putting 30, 32. I need to know each one. I need to take care of the lives of each one. I need to make sure that each one learns what they need to learn really well, and I need to be able to pray with them before they go on the hill and when they come back. I cannot do that with more than 30 people. What we need is more people that can help people go on the hill. And we are trying. Because, my father, some of my relatives, myself, we are looking always for the people who learn well and who then become capable of doing the same we do. That's how it spreads. Like the example I gave you of the tree that has seeds that go to other places to make other trees. But if everyone goes to only one place and you have hundreds of people in one ceremonial location, there may be teachers and ceremonial leaders that can make that work, and I admire them. I don't know how to do that, because I like to really know each person that I am working with, and I feel responsible. I feel responsible for not only for their lives, but for them really learning well. And in order for them to learn well, I have to have an intimate connection with them. I have to become close to them, and I cannot become close to huge amounts of individuals, only a few.
And my understanding is your request for those who do participate is that it's actually a 5-year commitment, because it's before you come and just participate as a vision quester, you actually support others who are doing it as a volunteer. And then you come back yourself 4 consecutive years for more than 4 days at a time, even though it's 4 days without food and water, fasting and praying and being awake, that the commitment is actually bigger than just the 4 days or the one time.
Yeah, I just want to add, I don't know if I told you this, but after the 5 years, there can be 5 more or 10 more, depends on you, because there are people that we are a family that has grown throughout the years, and many, not all of them, because it's a personal decision, but many of the people who did 4 years of Vision Quest, then they kept coming. At least 1 year they have to come back to do what we call a wopila, which is a thank you ceremony, to give thanks for all that was received for the 4 years. So that makes 6. After that, some of the people, they want, I say, hey, I need help. I cannot put 30 people on the hill by myself. It's a lot of work. Some of you, please come back and help. And some people come back and keep helping for 5, 10, 15 more years.
Wow.
Like that,
Amazing.
So there are people in our ceremonial community coming here for 20 years. And those are the people who are the new trees that carry, the seed went deep inside. And those people now, run sweat lodges or do things like that. Of course, it's very delicate to pass an indigenous way of prayer to someone who didn't grow up in an indigenous culture. And, I respect the indigenous people that do not want to do that or do not agree. But there are some indigenous elders and leaders who say that actually we need to do that. We need to teach our ways. But some of us who do that, we do it in a very, very responsible way. I only share the way of doing some ceremony or a sweat lodge or something with someone who didn't grow up in an indigenous nation if they prove themselves throughout many, many, many years of work and have full respect for the traditions and the way we do things, So for those of the people who want to learn these ways from indigenous people, let me say something that may sound funny, but, and you can take it any way you want, as a joke or as a serious thing. I say Thanksgiving, next Thanksgiving, November next year, instead of, doing a big Thanksgiving celebration at home and spend money in a lot of food, go to an indigenous reservation and give thanks to the indigenous people for keeping alive the ancient memory of what it is to be a human being and the connection to the earth through culture, prayer, ceremony that keep alive the connection between humans and the earth. In our culture, when we want something, it all starts with giving a gift, to ask for any favor or any guidance, the first thing we do is offer tobacco or give a gift and say, here, this is for you, because I may ask for your help, like that, and then build a relationship, keep your antennas sharp, and see who may be able to help you. By the way, I 100% believe that the one who runs all this is the earth herself and the spiritual guides of humanity. So when someone is ready, the teacher comes, that's really true.
Yeah.
So, it's not about like going everywhere seeking for a teacher or doing things like that. Just, have the intention. I'm ready. I really need to do this. One thing leads to another, and then you end up, knowing someone who says, yeah, there is, these people in Arizona or in South Dakota or here and there, and go visit them, bring them a gift, and humbly, once you have earned their trust, ask for help, but there is a lot of, it's a damaged relationship that needs to be repaired. Let's be aware that the people who carry the wisdom and the containers for doing these practices in a safe way, and actually in a way that really works, where you don't waste 4 days on a mountain, but you really receive the help that you need, the people who hold the memory of humanity, this memory belongs to humanity, of how human beings develop these relationships, these profound relationships with themselves and the sacred powers of nature in the spirit world, are people that belong to cultures that have been conquered and damaged in many ways, so, that also has to be addressed, it is part of it. That cannot be ignored. There is an asking for help to people whose lands were stolen, whose ways were made wrong, and were people who were colonized. So how do we approach that? How do we go to someone like that, in a respectful manner, willing to even have that conversation,
No.
like, and say, hey, how do we do this in a humble way,
Yeah, I would imagine however we do it, there's some humility involved,
Yes, absolutely. And my father, my adopted father, Basil Brave Heart, he's Oglala Lakota medicine man from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. He has done, and he still does, a lot of work around forgiveness. He says publicly that, and you may find, he has done some of what I'm doing now with immense wisdom, and he speaks about the importance of forgiveness, the healing power of forgiveness, how healing it is to ask for forgiveness, and how healing it is to be asked to forgive, and the way he explains it and what he has found about that is very, very, very profound. So the sharing of our traditions and the sharing of the way we do our ceremonies with people of the world is very, very delicate.
Yeah.
I'm always consulting. Actually this year I have invited some indigenous leaders for a gathering, so we can have a council around it. I need to ask the question. I'm learning. How do we share our ways? In a way that there is no cultural appropriation. We don't lose the treasures of our ancestors, or they are not taken from us and misused or used for the wrong purposes. And at the same time, we do forgive and we do participate in the healing of the world by giving some of our ancient wisdom to people that are sincere and need that wisdom for their work.
Yeah.
A work that will benefit all of humanity by healing the earth, all that damage done to the earth, and by also, bringing wisdom into all of the institutions that run the world, scientific, educational, government, and everywhere. So it is a very delicate subject that, it's kind of new, that some indigenous people are sharing, and mistakes are being made for sure, but there are also some really good benefits to it, some really good people learning and using what they are learning in a good way. So this is, it's a big conversation happening right now.
Yeah.
And when you, Brian, asked this question, and you even put it out there for other people to ask about how to benefit from these ancient traditions, I have to say these things. They are right in the middle of it.
Thank you for sharing that. And also, even more, thank you for doing that, being in that middle place of, serving as an intermediary or a liaison of a kind between, a bridge between the traditions of ancient wisdom and the healing for our modern world. I think there's many, many people who are looking for this, and many more who stand to benefit from it. What, in your opinion, what's the most important quality for a spiritual teacher?
Humility, number one. Nothing else works without that one.
I totally could have guessed that from what you said earlier. That's great. Okay, let me just begin to wrap up by saying thank you. And one way that I have endeavored to express my gratitude to you for sharing your time and your knowledge and your experience, your wisdom really, is I have made what's called a microloan to an entrepreneur in Peru, actually. I've gone on to kiva.org, which is a website I like to use to try to share my blessings with people around the world. And I've loaned $100 to a woman named Leah who lives in San Antonio, Huabal. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but she'll use this money to help buy fertilizer and to prune her coffee plantation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one way that I have wanted to show my thanks to you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's beautiful. It's beautiful to hear that. And I want to tell you something, Brian. I have had a few interviews throughout my life. Not many, maybe 10, 15.
Uh-huh.
And the way you do it is excellent. It's I don't know how you do it, but the way you keep track of the most important elements of the interview, the way you come back to things that were said before that are really important, the way you right away know to what part of my book you have to go to in order to support something that we are talking about. Amazing, really. I mean, you're very, very good at doing this. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. I couldn't do it without you, Arkan. You make it all possible.
Yeah, I just want to tell you something that you could hear in the interview, and maybe we can use for our next interview. There was something really precious that could have had a little bit more of development when you asked me about. One of the most powerful questions I felt you asked me was about building a culture that is not aggressive.
Yes. Yeah.
But a culture of sharing. And I was telling you that there is an example of that. And, I have some knowledge of how the Caral people did it without weapons.
Yeah.
They influenced a lot of people in the Andean world without weapons. They spread their culture, actually, by sharing and by becoming attractive to other people that wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And also I know a lot about how the Inca did it, but the Inca did it out of a state of emergency. There was war, so the memory of this is, in my opinion, is it belongs to the memory of humanity, because these were human beings. They were not from another species. And what they accomplished, what they did in those times, is extraordinary. And I really think that it could be a reference for all those of us in the modern world trying to build a new culture, because this new culture may look a lot like what those people did thousands of years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's definitely something I want to explore, because there was something I wanted to ask about that's related to that, is your sentence in The Time of the Black Jaguar. The whole economic system needs to become natural, ecological, and sacred. And so I think those two things would be a great place to pick up. So I would love to do that.
Okay, excellent.
Again, saying thank you, Arkan, and thank you to everyone who has listened. I hope that you've taken away many, many things that will deepen and develop in you, go far beyond the level of mind, but as Arkan said, to truly embody the teaching, some of the ideas here, explore them in yourselves, find yourself if you have the sense that something's missing, and ultimately infuse it into your heart, mind, body, spirit, and live it as the truest expression of who you are. So with that, take care, and till next time, we'll resume part 2 with Arkan Lushwala. Despite living in an age where we have more comforts and conveniences than ever before, life isn't working for many people. Whether it's in the developed world, where we're dealing with depression, anxiety, addiction, divorce, jobs we hate, relationships that don't work, or people in the developing world who don't have access to clean water or sanitation or healthcare or education, or who live in conflict zones, there's a lot of people on the planet that life isn't working very well for. If you're one of those people, I invite you to connect with me at goodliving.com. I've created Life's Best Practices Breakthrough Coaching to help you navigate the transitions that we all go through. Whether you've just graduated school, you're going through a divorce, you just got married, you're headed into retirement, you're starting a business, you just lost your job, whatever it is you're facing, I've developed a 36-week course that you go through with me and a community of achievers and seekers who are committed to improving their own lives and the lives of others. So through this online program, you will have the opportunity to go deep into every area of your life, explore life's big questions, create answers for yourself in community, get clarity and accountability. If that's something you're interested to learn about, I invite you to contact me directly at brian@brianmiller.com or by visiting goodliving.com.